August 15, 1954, 3:17 Moscow time. A telephone of special importance rang at the headquarters of the East Siberian district of the KGB. The duty radio operator, Sergeant Kovalev, received a signal from the call sign, White Seagull, 7, a hydrological expedition on Lake Beloy in Yakutia. The message was short, but each word sounded like a death sentence. Coordinates 67 degrees 43 minutes north, 134 degrees 12 minutes east. The lake is demonstrating anomalous activity. The water glows blue at night. Water temperature plus 4 degrees Celsius at an air temperature of 18 degrees Celsius. Mass death of fish, corpses are not decomposing. Unidentified objects are rising from the bottom. Immediate evacuation is required. Sergeant Kovalev read the radiogram twice before picking up the government phone. His head was spinning. In his 5 years of service in the department, he had seen a lot: secret operations, spy scandals, sabotage. But this had never happened before. The water glowed. The fish didn't rot. What was rising from the bottom of the lake that no one had ever heard of? The night headquarters smelled of hot tobacco smoke, electricity, and old wood. The crackling of the fluorescent lamps mingled with the sighs of the autumn wind outside the window and the clatter of the typewriter on which the duty typist, Corporal Panov, was preparing reports for the previous shift. The usual routine. The usual night. Until that call. "Comrade Lieutenant Colonel," Sergeant Kovalev said into the receiver, trying to keep his voice from shaking, "an urgent message has arrived from Lake Beloy. Category: lightning." There was silence on the other end of the line for a few seconds. Then the hoarse voice of Lieutenant Colonel Sadov was heard. Read. Kovalev slowly, word by word, relayed the contents of the radiogram. When he finished, there was silence again. Long, heavy. The same silence hung in the air after Comrade Stalin's death that same year. The silence of anxious anticipation. "Is there a connection?" asked Sadov. "We are trying to make contact within an hour. The air is clear, but there is no answer." Lieutenant Colonel Sadov rushed to headquarters 20 minutes later. Sleep-deprived, in a green overcoat thrown over his tunic, with the smell of cologne and soap shampoo, he had clearly been woken up from his bed. Sadov was a tall, bony man with gray hair at his temples. A reliable man who had gone through the entire war from Stalingrad to Berlin as the head of army counterintelligence. Now he was responsible for points of the largest country in the world, scattered across Siberia and the Far East. "Who do we have in the air today?" Sadov's first question. "Major Antonov," the duty officer replied. "I was making a tour of the airports. I should finish now and head to the barracks." Sadov nodded and walked over to the military cartographic table in the corner of the headquarters. He laid out a 1:500,000 scale map. Siberia. A vast territory between the Lena and Indigirka rivers. Lake Beloy was marked on the map as a small blue dot among thousands of square kilometers of taiga. No roads, no settlements nearby. The nearest settlement was the abandoned weather station Ugryamaya, 180 kilometers to the south. "When was the last time you went out?" Sadov asked the duty officer. Kovalev leafed through the communications log. August 14, 1930. They reported on the planned execution of works. Nothing unusual. Frequency? Standard, 40.75. Backup? He's also silent. My radio operator tried 4 times. Silence. Sadov tapped his heels on the parquet. 5 years of service as the head of the East Siberian district had taught him to feel anxiety with his skin, his gut. Such coincidences do not happen. A lake that no one had ever heard of suddenly begins to glow. An expedition that had been working without a hitch for 3 months suddenly falls silent. After all, this is not just any expedition, this is the hydrological group of Comrade Petrov, a top-notch war veteran, a recipient of orders. They're trying to get through the backup radio network, Sadov ordered. Every 15 minutes. If there's no answer in 2 hours, call Major Antonov. But at that moment the door slammed and a very young radio operator, Sazarkov, walked in, a shaggy, heavy-haired kid from Yakutia. He looked scared and carefully carried a sheet of paper from the radio teletype in his hands. "Comrade Lieutenant Colonel," he stammered, "an urgent radiogram has arrived from the center. For you personally." Sadov took the piece of paper and read it carefully. The message was short: prepare a special group. Coordinates 67 degrees 43 minutes north, 134 degrees 12 minutes east, secret facility. Details as they come in. Sadov personally. The signature was unusual, not a surname, but an incomprehensible code, Alpha 7. Lieutenant Colonel Sadov felt the ground slipping away from under his feet. The coordinates were the same. Lake Beloy. But Moscow knew more about the expedition than he did. Knew it in advance. Who transmitted this report? He asked Sazarkov. Special Service of Important Persons, Comrade Lieutenant Colonel. Aviation Communication Channel. Sadov turned back to the map and peered at the dot that marked Lake Beloy. Same coordinates. Same object. Until now, it had been just a task, to find the missing expedition. Now it had become an object of national importance. At that moment, another phone rang, a long-distance one. Sadov picked up the receiver and heard the familiar voice of the assistant to the head of the regional KGB department, Colonel Karpov. "Pavel Ignatievich, an emergency group is flying out. Commander Major Antonov Sergei Dmitrievich, 38 years old, former frontline soldier. Take the group and full support with you, doctor, radio operator, divers. Special equipment." "What special equipment?" asked Sadov, although inside he didn't want to know the answer. "Which is given for exceptional cases." "I see. And the topic?" "No questions, Pavel Ignatievich. The topic is beyond the red line. The report will still be coming." The connection was immediately lost. Sadov put the earphone down and realized everything had been decided without him. His task was only to ensure transportation. The operation had already begun. The door to the headquarters opened abruptly and the confident, commanding voice of Major Antonov was heard. "Comrade Lieutenant Colonel Sadov, Major Antonov, in response to your order." Sergei Dmitrievich Antonov was a short, stocky man with a stern face and large features. He had a scar running from his ear to his chin on his right cheek, a memory of the Finnish War, where he served as an instructor advisor. In essence, he was an unusually versatile specialist at the same time, an engineer, a soldier, an investigator. A man who knew how to hold the strings of control in a variety of situations. "Sergei Dmitrievich, sit down." Sadov pointed to the chair in front of his desk and put a folder with documents in front of him. "We have an emergency." "I'm listening carefully." "A hydrological expedition has disappeared in Yakutia. The last radiogram reported unusual conditions. The lake is glowing, fish are dying for no reason and without decomposition. The water temperature is abnormal. Antonov looked at the map, where Lake Beloy was marked with a red cross. Distance to the desired object? 500 kilometers north of Irkutsk. The nearest landing site is 120 kilometers from the target. Then by tracked transport. What is the composition of the group? Sadov turned and took several personal files out of the card index. Besides you, Doctor Captain of the Medical Service Zaitsev Mitrofan Andreevich, 41 years old. Former frontline surgeon. Radio operator Kulikov Pavel Stepanovich, 26 years old. Shortwave communications specialist. Petty Officer Belov Gennady Petrovich, 34 years old, diver. Worked on ships of the Northern Fleet. Special equipment? According to the list from the center. Sadov handed Antonov a folded sheet of paper. What is needed? They don't give it out on regular missions. Antonov unfolded the sheet. It read: DP 5 dosimeters, chemical kit for sample analysis, hexagen explosives, 50 kilograms. TNT with detonators, 25 kilograms. Snow weapons for a group of 4 people, 10 days of high-calorie products, special containers for transporting samples, antibacterial drugs, special series radios. Major Antonov whistled slowly. This was not a list for a geological investigation, but for war. Almost 100 weight of explosives, special communications equipment, ammunition. Sergei Dmitrievich, Sadov said quietly, this is a long-term matter. No one will raise questions about the reasons for the trip. Officially, this is an industrial safety check on the lake, in connection with a potential chemical threat. Antonov nodded. He understood perfectly well that he was being sent to a place where the coordinates on the maps he had known since childhood were something that could not be explained by any logic, any possible experimental devices. When is the flight? In 2 hours. I'll be ready. 2 hours seemed like an eternity. Antonov went to his office, called her home and briefly told his wife that he was leaving on a business trip for an indefinite period. He swore to answer questions evasively. He didn't know when he would return. He couldn't say where he would be. 2 hours later he stood at the military transport airfield. The trees in the early autumn fog stretched like shadows across the concrete strip. At the runway, inscribed in the sturdy hangars, a heavy Mi-4 with its tail number painted across its entire wing was preparing for takeoff. The pilots, Captain Vasiliev, Navigator Junior Lieutenant Smaltsev, Flight Engineer Orkhov, were already on board and were making pre-flight calculations. 3 wooden boxes with army locks and some serious equipment were already standing in the storage area near the plant. The cargo was loaded only in the presence of a special KGB officer, Senior Lieutenant Portnov. When Antonov approached, Portnov showed documents with gray seals and said, "Comrade Major, the cargo has been delivered according to your list. You will have only a personal report. If the task is not completed, the cargo is to be burned immediately. If the task is completed, the contents of box number 3 are to be destroyed. And a mandatory report is to be filed. Is that clear?" "Got it." Antonov tucked the whip into his belt. The boxes looked like dark wooden coffins to him. What was stored in them? And why shouldn't he open them except in exceptional cases? Dr. Zaitsev and radio operator Kulikov were already sitting in their cabin at the side of the ship, dejected and silent, sadly looking away. They were supposed to be cheerful people on a good trip. Petty Officer Belov, a professional diver, looked hard and concentrated. He was not a man of many words. "Is everything loaded?" Antonov asked, approaching the plane. "Everything is as it should be," Zaitsev replied, rubbing his hands. I just don't understand why I need gas masks and psychiatric drugs with marine stimulants. We'll see when we get there, Captain. At that moment, from where the observation tower stood, a horn of the command to start was heard. Antonov turned around. The chief of military transport flights, Major Boris, was standing on the tower and signaling the start of the flight. Everyone aboard, shouted Captain Vasilyev. 15 minutes later, the Mi-4, with a heavy roar, lifted off from the runway and headed north. Inside the cabin, with the engines rumbling softly, Antonov spread a map on his lap for review. 500 kilometers of territory where no man had ever been. A black dot on a gray map. And something is waiting there. Something that made Moscow raise the alarm at 3 in the morning. Something that requires explosives, diverse and psychiatric drugs. Something that glows under the thickness of the Yakut ice and makes fish die but not decompose. Antonov looked out the window at the lights of the airfield disappearing below. He did not yet know that in 24 hours he would encounter something that would change his understanding not only of his service, but of the very nature of reality. He did not know that Lake Beloy would be the last place on Earth that he would see as an ordinary Soviet officer. After that, he would forever become the keeper of a secret that should not exist. The plane climbed into the Siberian night. And below, at coordinates 67 degrees 43 minutes north, 134 degrees 12 minutes east, something ancient and incomprehensible was preparing to meet the people who dared to disturb its sleep. The Mi-4 helicopter had been flying over the Siberian taiga for 7 hours. The engines roared monotonously, beating out a metallic rhythm on the fuselage. Antonov sat by the window and looked down at the endless sea of green spruce trees, occasionally interrupted by yellow stripes of swamps and silvery threads of rivers. No roads, no signs of civilization. Only wild, primeval nature, which looked exactly the same 1,000 years ago. Radio operator Kulikov checked the connection every half hour. Up to the turning point, everything was fine, a clear signal, clear reception. But as they approached the coordinates of Lake Beloy, interference began to appear on the air. First a slight crackling, then increasingly strong distortions. Comrade Major, Kulikov addressed Antonov, taking off his headphones, there's something strange with the radio communication. The interference is getting louder. And there shouldn't be a magnetic field here. Antonov approached the radio operator. Instead of a straight line, chaotic peaks danced on the oscilloscope screen. When did it start? About 40 kilometers ago. At first I thought it was a thunderstorm front, but the sky was clear. Dr. Zaitsev, who was sitting opposite with a medical box on his knees, raised his head. I have some strange things too. The barometer shows the pressure is higher than normal, although we are at altitude. And the thermometer, he shook the device, either it broke, or the temperature is really rising. Sergeant Major Belov, who had been dozing until then, opened his eyes. And my compass is spinning like crazy. The needle points north, then spins east. Antonov felt a familiar feeling in his stomach, a premonition of danger that had not deceived him in Finland or at Stalingrad. Something was wrong with this place. Something fundamentally wrong. The pilot's voice came from the intercom. Major, we're approaching the target. I see the lake. But, this is something strange. Antonov walked into the cockpit. Captain Vasilyev and navigator Smaltsev looked ahead with tense faces. What do you see? See for yourself. Antonov glanced at the windshield and froze. Below, amidst the dark green taiga, lay a lake. But this was no ordinary lake. The water in it was not blue or black, but some kind of milky blue, and it glowed. Even in daylight, a faint, cold glow was noticeable, coming from the depths. "Damn it," the navigator whispered. "Where is the expedition camp?" Antonov asked. Vasiliev pointed to the eastern shore. "There, the tents are visible. But there is no movement." Indeed, there were several military tents on the shore, neatly arranged in a line. Antennas and boxes with equipment were visible nearby. Everything looked organized, as it should be in an expedition. Only there were no people. "Let's land in a clearing 2 kilometers from the camp," Antonov ordered. "Approach on foot." The landing went smoothly, but as soon as the helicopter touched the ground, Antonov felt something strange. The air here was different. Not just cold, thick, dense. It was hard to breathe, like in the mountains, although the altitude was almost at sea level. While the group was unloading the equipment, Antonov looked around carefully. The taiga around the clearing looked normal, tall firs, moss, bushes. But there was one oddity: absolute silence. No birds, no wind noise in the treetops, no buzzing of insects. Only your own breathing and the beating of your heart in your ears. "This is not a good place," Belov muttered, checking his diving equipment. "Why do you think so?" "Listen. Where are the birds? Where are the animals? There's always some noise in the taiga. And here, it's like a cemetery." The group moved toward the lake along a barely visible path that had apparently been trodden by the expedition. As they approached the water, the air became denser and the strange feeling of unease grew stronger. They found the camp after half an hour's walk. Everything was in place: 7 tents in a row, a radio station under a tarpaulin canopy, a field kitchen, boxes with geological equipment. But there were no people. "Comrade Major," Kulikov called from the radio station. "The equipment is working. The generator is on, the batteries are charged. But the communications log ends on August 14th. Antonov entered the command tent. On the folding table lay maps, reports, field diaries. Everything was neat, as it should be in a scientific expedition. He opened the last diary. The entries were kept by the geologist Belsky. August 12th. Water samples were taken from a depth of 15 meters. Temperature plus 4 degrees Celsius, which is strange for August in Yakutia. The chemical composition is normal, but the sample in the test tube glows with a weak blue light even far from the lake. August 13th. The lake glowed brighter at night. Petrov lowered an underwater camera on a 30-meter cable. Some regular structures are visible on the bottom. Not stones, too geometric. We are planning an underwater survey tomorrow. August 14th. In the morning, all the fish in the lake floated up dead. The corpses did not decompose, did not smell. As if time had stopped for them. Petrov said something strange: "The lake is alive. It breathes." I do not understand what he meant. At this point the recording ended. "Zaitsev!" Antonov shouted. "Inspect the tents, look for signs of struggle or illness." The doctor methodically examined each tent. Half an hour later he reported. "No signs of violence. Beds unmade, personal belongings in place. It seems as if people just disappeared." "What about food? Weapons?" "The canned goods are intact, even the open cans are standing. The carbines are in place, the ammunition is untouched." Antonov approached the shore of the lake. Up close, the glow of the water was even more noticeable. The bluish light came not from the surface, but from the depths, pulsating with a slow, almost hypnotic rhythm. The water was transparent, like glass. At the bottom, about 30 meters from the shore, some structures were indeed visible. Not stones, not snags, something artificial, of a regular geometric shape. "Belov, what do you say?" he addressed the diver. The foreman squatted down by the water. "It's deep, deeper than the maps show. It's at least 50 meters to the bottom. And those things on the bottom," he shook his head. "I don't know what that is. But I wouldn't advise going down there without preparation." "Why?" "And you put your hand in the water." Antonov leaned down and touched the water's surface with his palm. The water wasn't just cold, it was icy. But it wasn't ordinary cold. It was something else, piercing, reaching down to the bones. And another strange thing, his reflection in the water looked wrong. As if it was looking at him not from the water, but from somewhere else. "Kulikov, try to contact the base," Antonov ordered, quickly wiping his hand on his pants. The radio operator turned on the transmitter. "Taiga calling center. Taiga calling center. Do you copy?" The only response was a crackling noise. "It's strange," Kulikov muttered. "The connection was good this morning. But now it's like something's jamming it. And the backup frequency?" He is also silent. Antonov felt the situation getting out of control. A missing expedition, a glowing lake, dead fish that didn't rot, lost contact with the base. Too many coincidences. "We'll set up camp here," he decided. "Zaitsev, inspect the water and the dead fish. Belov, prepare the diving gear, but don't go down yet. Kulikov, try to get in touch every half hour." By evening, the picture had not become clearer. Zaitsev's tests showed that the water was chemically normal, but glowing due to some unknown microorganisms. The dead fish really had not decomposed, it simply lay in the water, as if time had stopped for it. As darkness fell, the lake changed. The glow increased several times. Blue flashes ran across the surface of the water, creating complex patterns. And new lights appeared at the bottom, not chaotic, but organized, moving along certain trajectories. "Major, come here," called Belov, who was standing right by the water. Antonov approached. The foreman pointed into the depths. "See? These lights aren't moving randomly. They're patrolling the area." Indeed, there were slowly moving luminous dots on the bottom of the lake. They moved along clear routes, stopped from time to time, then continued on their way. It seemed like intelligent activity. "These could be deep-sea fish," Zaitsev suggested. "In a freshwater lake? In Siberia?" Belov doubted. Antonov stood and looked at the underwater lights, trying to understand the logic of their movement. And suddenly he noticed something else. His reflection in the water, it was not moving synchronously with him. When he raised his right hand, the reflection raised his left. When he turned his head to the right, the reflection turned to the left. "Zaitsev, look at your reflection," he quietly said to the doctor. He leaned over the water and suddenly recoiled. Damn it! It wasn't me. It wasn't Zaitsev who was reflected in the water, but some old man in an unfamiliar uniform. The old man looked at them from below and silently moved his lips. "What is he saying?" Kulikov whispered. Antonov looked closely at the movements of the reflection's lips. "It seems. Don't go down, it's dangerous. At that moment, the radio station suddenly came to life. A weak, distorted voice came from the speaker. "Do you hear? Does anyone hear? It's Petrov. We are here, we are all here." Kulikov rushed to the radio. "Comrade Petrov. Comrade Petrov, do you copy? Where are you?" The voice on the air became a little clearer. "Underwater, don't go down, here time flows differently, we are all here, but we are not ourselves anymore. Petrov, state your exact location. We see you, standing on the shore, don't look into the water for long, don't look, it shows the future, a terrible future." The connection was cut off abruptly, as if by a knife. The group stood in silence, digesting what they had heard. Petrov was alive. The expedition team was alive. But they were underwater, warning of danger. What did he mean by, "time flows differently"? Zaitsev asked. "And what is this future in the reflections?" Belov added. Antonov looked at his watch. It was 9 o'clock in the evening. But something was wrong. His watch showed 2100 hours, Zaitsev's watch showed 2115, Kulikov's showed 2045, Belov's showed 2130. "Check the time," he said. It turned out that everyone had their own time. And the discrepancies were increasing. This was impossible, all the watches were synchronized before the flight. "Guys," Antonov said slowly, "it seems we've ended up in a place where different laws of physics apply." He made a decision. "Tomorrow morning we go underwater. Belov, prepare equipment for 2. The rest stay on the surface and maintain contact." "Major, maybe we shouldn't?" Zaitsev suggested cautiously. "Petrov warned us. We have orders to find the expedition. And they are there, under the water. So, we are going after them." The night was restless. The lake glowed brighter and brighter, and the underwater lights moved more and more actively. During his shift, Antonov caught himself looking into the water several times and seeing strange images, destroyed cities, people in unfamiliar clothes, flying machines that did not exist. By morning he realized, the lake really does show the future. And this future frightens him more than any danger he faced in the war. Something was going to happen to their country. Something that was better left unexplained. But now that he had seen it, he couldn't stop. He had to go down there, underwater, and find out the whole truth. Even if that truth was worse than his darkest premonitions. The lake was waiting. It glowed with a cold blue light and beckoned into its depths, promising answers to questions that were best left unasked. The voice from the radio sounded like it was coming from the grave. Distorted, intermittent, but recognizable. Antonov knew this voice from the dossier, the head of the expedition, Petrov Alexander Vasilyevich, a hydrologist of the highest category, a holder of the Order of the Red Star. "Hear me, we are here, underwater, don't go down, time is different here." Kulikov feverishly tweaked the settings, trying to strengthen the signal. "Comrade Major, the frequency is not ours. This is a range that does not exist at all." "Petrov, answer." Antonov shouted into the microphone. "Where are you? How many of you are there?" The interference increased, but through the crackling came an answer. "All 7 are alive, but changed. We see the past and the future at the same time. Do not approach the center of the lake, there is a portal." "What portal?" "Petrov, speak more clearly." "Under the bottom, an ancient city, technology, they were waiting for us, waiting for contact." The voice was getting weaker. "Showed maps of the future, saw a flag over the Kremlin, not red, tricolor. The connection was cut off. Dead silence hung in the air. Antonov felt a chill run down his spine. A tricolor flag over the Kremlin? It was nonsense, an anti-Soviet fantasy. But Petrov's voice sounded sober, meaningful. Maybe this is a provocation? Zaitsev suggested. Someone could have captured the expedition and is forcing them to transmit disinformation. From under the water? Belov noted skeptically. And who in Siberia would organize such an operation? Antonov looked at the lake again. The underwater lights became brighter, their movement more intense. As if something down there had responded to the radio transmissions. Belov, how much time does it take to prepare for the dive? Under these conditions, about 3 hours. But I strongly advise against it, Comrade Major. There are too many unknown factors. What if they are really there, under the water? Alive? The foreman was silent. Then they have air for a maximum of 24 hours. After that. He didn't finish, but it was clear to everyone, after this there would be no one to save. Antonov made a decision. Prepare your gear. We'll be going down at dawn. The night at the lake was restless. Antonov barely slept, keeping watch at the radio station and watching the underwater lights. Kulikov tried to contact Petrov every hour, but the airwaves were silent. At 4 in the morning, something strange happened. Antonov was dozing in a folding chair when he was awakened by a quiet splash. He opened his eyes and saw on the surface of the lake, a man. The figure stood on the water as if it were solid ground. It was a middle-aged man in the wet clothes of a geologist. His face was pale, his eyes wide open. He looked straight at Antonov and moved his lips silently. "Hey!" the major shouted, jumping up from his chair. The figure raised its hand, pointing to the center of the lake. Then it slowly sank into the water, without creating a single wave. "What's going on there?" Zaitsev woke up. "I think I saw one of the missing people." "Alive?" Antonov did not answer. What he saw looked like a person. But living people do not walk on water. Dawn brought new oddities. When the sun rose, its rays, falling on the surface of the lake, refracted unnaturally. Instead of the usual reflection in the water, images appeared that could not be. Antonov saw a snow-covered red square, but above the Kremlin there was not a red flag with a hammer and sickle, but a white-blue-red tricolor. He saw strange machines without horses, flying machines, buildings made of glass and metal. "Major, do you see this?" Kulikov whispered. "I see." "What could this be?" "I don't know. But the future looks different." Belov finished checking the scuba gear. "The equipment is ready." But the depth turned out to be greater than we thought, almost 80 meters to the bottom. And the water temperature is abnormal, +4 degrees at the surface, and it gets warmer with depth. Warmer? At 40 meters it's already +15 degrees. This contradicts all the laws of physics. Antonov put on a wetsuit. The material was cold, unpleasantly sticky. In the mask, everything looked distorted, unreal. "The dive time is exactly 20 minutes, Belov warned. "I'm not taking any more risks." "Got it." "Kulikov, keep in touch every 5 minutes." Antonov entered the water. The cold pierced even through the neoprene, but it was not a physical cold, something deeper, penetrating the very soul. He turned on the underwater light and began to dive. At a depth of 10 meters the water became warmer. But another sensation appeared, pressure. Not physical, but some kind of mental. As if something was trying to penetrate his consciousness. 20 meters. Visibility was excellent, but what he saw defied common sense. Scattered across the bottom of the lake were regular geometric structures, not rocks, but clearly artificial structures. They glowed from within with the same blue light. 30 meters. Here the first shock awaited him. People stood motionless among the underwater structures. 7 people in polar explorers' clothes. They were not lying down, not swimming, they stood as if alive. Their eyes were open, looking up. "Base, can you hear me?" Antonov hissed into the hydrophone. "We hear you, Comrade Major." "Found the expedition. All 7 of them. They're standing on the bottom alive." "Alive? Underwater?" "They're not breathing, but they're not dead either. Their eyes are open and they look meaningfully." Antonov swam closer. One of those standing was Petrov, the leader of the expedition. Seeing the major, he slowly raised his hand and pointed towards the center of the lake. Where Petrov pointed, something incredible was rising. A huge spherical structure, half submerged in the bottom of the lake. The material was unknown, not metal, not stone. Black, but with an internal glow. Patterns of light ran across the surface of the sphere, forming complex geometric shapes. "Base, I see an object. Large, artificial in origin. Possibly a spaceship." "Major, time is running out. Get up." But Antonov couldn't tear himself away from the spectacle. The sphere pulsed, and with each impulse, images appeared in his head. Not thoughts, not memories, pure information. He saw the Earth from space, but not as it was shown in textbooks. A planet surrounded by a network of artificial satellites. Continents cut by road lines and city lights. Countries whose borders did not coincide with modern maps. I saw the USSR, but not the current one. An empire torn apart by internal contradictions, falling apart. I saw how red flags were replaced by others, how Lenin monuments fell under the blows of hammers. "Major, get up immediately." Belov's voice sounded anxious. Antonov tried to push off the bottom, but he couldn't. His body didn't obey, as if his roots had grown into the lake's silt. And the images in his head were becoming brighter and more detailed. He saw himself old, in an unfamiliar uniform, with different shoulder straps. He saw himself reading a newspaper with an incomprehensible name, Komsomolskaya Pravda, but the content was completely different. Articles about private property, about elections from several candidates, about trips abroad. "Major." A shout in the headphones made him wake up. The sphere released him from its embrace. Antonov suddenly surfaced, barely controlling his ascent. The water around him seethed, as if boiling. On the surface he was met by the frightened faces of his comrades. "What was going on there?" asked Zaitsev, helping to pull the major to the shore. "The connection with you was lost for 10 minutes, Kulikov reported. And the lake, it was like it was boiling." Antonov sat down on the shore and took off his mask. His hands were shaking, but not from the cold. From what he saw. Down there, an object. Ancient, but working. "It shows the future." "What future?" Belov asked quietly. Antonov looked at his comrades. Honest Soviet officers who believed in the bright future of communism. How could he tell them that he had seen the collapse of everything they believed in? "Different," he answered cautiously. Completely different. And the expedition? Alive, but changed. They are part of this object now. Voluntarily. Zaitsev frowned. What do you mean, voluntarily? They saw what I saw. They learned the truth about the future. And they chose to stay there, underwater, to prepare humanity for change. The radio station came to life again. Petrov's voice now sounded calm, without interference. Major Antonov, you saw us. Now you know. Petrov, rise to the surface. This is an order. We can't. We are now linked to the Guardian. He slept for thousands of years. But your nuclear tests woke him up. Now he is preparing for contact. To contact with whom? With humanity. But not with the current one. With the one that will be in 40 years. When empires fall and a new era begins. Antonov felt reality cracking at the seams. Everything he believed in, everything he served, turned out to be temporary, transient. What should I do? He asked. It's up to you. You can stay with us, become a guide between the worlds. Or leave, but then the lake will be destroyed. The choice is yours. What if I choose the third way? Which? Keep the secret, but do not interfere with the Guardian's preparation for contact. Long pause. Then. Perhaps. But the price will be high. You will know the future, but you will not be able to change it. You will see how the world you defended collapses. Antonov looked at the lake, where beneath the water, an ancient mind was preparing to change the course of history. Then at his comrades, who looked at him with trust and waited for orders. How much time do I have to think? Until dawn tomorrow. Then the Guardian will make his own decision. The connection was lost. Antonov was left sitting on the shore of the lake, where a choice awaited him underwater between serving the past and embracing the future. A choice that would determine not only his fate, but also the fate of the country he had sworn to serve. And in the depths of the lake, the ancient mind continued its work, preparing for the awakening of humanity. Time was counting down the last hours of the old world. The lake water turned out to be deceptively deep. What seemed 30 meters deep from the surface actually went far down. Belov lowered the measuring cable 100 meters and did not reach the bottom. The temperature under the water was abnormally high for a Yakut lake, plus 15 degrees Celsius, as if there was a heater somewhere deep down. Comrade Major, the sergeant major reported after checking the diving gear, I'm ready to descend. But I warn you, if something goes wrong, you'll have to lift me quickly. Antonov nodded. He put on a light diving suit himself. A KGB officer had no right to send subordinates where he himself was not prepared to go. Kulikov remained on the shore with a radio station, Zaitsev, with medical equipment. The dive began at midday, when the sun was at its zenith. But as soon as they reached a depth of 10 meters, daylight almost disappeared. It was replaced by that same blue glow emanating from the depths. It pulsed with the rhythm of a human heart, slowly, steadily, hypnotically. At 20 meters the first strange things appeared. There were no fish at all, but some glowing particles were floating in the water, similar to plankton, only larger. They did not move chaotically, but as if on command, forming complex patterns. Belov, do you see this? Antonov asked into the intercom. I see, Comrade Major. And I don't like it. It's like someone is meeting us. At a depth of 30 meters, artificial structures began to appear. At first, they seemed to be shipwrecks, metal beams covered with an unknown material that was neither rust nor algae. But as they approached, it became clear, these were not wrecks. These were parts of some enormous structure. "Oh my God," Belov whispered. They were looking out over an entire underwater city. Buildings, if they could be called that, stretched in all directions, as far as the light could reach. Their architecture was unearthly, walls met at angles that hurt the eye, corridors twisted in spirals, defying the laws of geometry. The material of the structures resembled metal, but glowed from within with the same blue light. "Antonov, look to the right," Belov called. There was a light in one of the nearby buildings. Not electric, but the same pulsating blue. Silhouettes of people were visible in the windows, if they were windows. They floated toward the building. The entrance was open, an oval opening with no door. Inside, a surprise awaited them. The room was filled not with water, but with air. Air with a metallic taste and a strange ozone smell. "How is this possible?" Antonov gasped, taking off his breathing apparatus. "I don't know, Comrade Major. But you can breathe." In the center of the room stood a table, or something like a table. People were sitting behind it. All 7 members of the missing expedition. Alive, but changed. Chief hydrologist Petrov raised his head when they appeared. His face was calm, but his eyes looked as if from another time. "Major Antonov," he said in a flat, monotonous voice. "We were waiting for you. We knew you'd come." "Comrade Petrov, what's going on here? Why haven't you contacted us?" Petrov stood up slowly. His movements were smooth, as if he were swimming in invisible water. "We can no longer leave this place. We have become part of the system. But it is not scary. We see all times at once. Past, present, future, all one." Geologist Belsky, who was sitting nearby, nodded. "Here, Major, time flows differently. We lived here for months, and only a few days passed up there. Or vice versa. I don't remember." "What is this place?" Antonov asked. "Let's go," said Petrov. "She wants to meet you." They walked down a corridor whose walls pulsed with light in time with their steps. The architecture of the building defied all laws of physics. They climbed the stairs, but somehow ended up lower than they started. Left turns led to rooms that should have been on the right. "Who is she?" asked Belov. "The Guardian," answered one of the expedition's geologists. "The one who sleeps for thousands of years under the lake. The one who sees everything and remembers everything." In the central chamber, she was waiting for them. The creature, or what had once been a creature, was the size of a small house. It resembled a giant octopus, but made of both light and metal. Its tentacles shimmered in every shade of blue, and in the center of the mass, an organ like a heart pulsed. "Don't be afraid," said Petrov. "She is kind. She is the keeper of knowledge." The creature moved one of its tentacles, and Antonov suddenly heard a voice. Not with his ears, the voice sounded right in his head. "Welcome, Major Sergei Dmitrievich Antonov. I've been waiting for you. I knew you would come because I saw it in the streams of time." "What are you?" Antonov asked out loud. "I am the last of my kind. My civilization perished when your ancestors still lived in caves. I am the keeper of memory, the watcher. I have slept beneath this lake for 12,000 years. Why are you here?" "I watch the development of your species. I record. I keep knowledge. Your planet is one of many where the mind goes from primitiveness to enlightenment. Or to self-destruction. The creature showed him images, not pictures, but living memories that materialized in the air. Antonov saw dinosaurs, the first humans, Egyptian pyramids, Roman legions, medieval castles. The entire history of mankind, filmed from a bird's eye view. But recently something happened that I didn't expect. Your nuclear tests woke me up before my time. The radiation changed the structure of the lake, made the water a conductor between dimensions. So what now? Now I must make a decision. Your species stands on the brink of great discovery or great destruction. The next 100 years will determine whether humanity survives or destroys itself. Antonov saw new images. The future. The USSR falling apart. America becoming the sole superpower. New wars, new technologies. Room-sized computers that fit in your pocket. People flying to other planets. And at the same time, nuclear explosions, ecological disasters, millions of refugees. I see several possible futures. In one, your country will collapse in 1991. In another, it will survive until 2020. In a third, World War III will begin in 10 years. Can you change this? I can direct. Push. But not change radically. Humanity must retain freedom of choice. The creature extended a tentacle toward Antonov. When it touched him, the Major felt thousands of images flashing in his head. He saw himself 20 years later, a gray-haired colonel who makes precise predictions about political events. He saw his children and grandchildren. He saw the day of his death. I offer you a choice, Major. You can stay here. Become my assistant. Gain knowledge that will help your people avoid many mistakes. Or you can leave, but then I will sleep again for 1,000 years. And if I stay? What will happen to my people? They will return to the surface. They will say that they found the expedition dead from an accident. The lake will be filled in on orders from Moscow. And you will be part of something bigger. Belov, who had been listening silently until then, suddenly spoke. Comrade Major, I don't understand half of what's going on here. But I understand one thing, we are being asked to betray our motherland. Not to betray, said Petrov. To save. Imagine, we will know in advance about all crises, all threats. We will be able to prevent wars, famines, catastrophes. At the cost of what? Antonov asked. At the cost of your humanity, the creature answered honestly. He who sees all times at once ceases to be human in the full sense. He becomes an observer, a guardian. Like me. Antonov looked at the members of the expedition. There was no fear or sadness in their eyes. There was something else, detachment, an understanding of something that was inaccessible to ordinary people. They were no longer fully human. How much time do I have to think? There is no time. Your colleagues above have already raised the alarm. In 24 hours, the army will be here. They will blow up the lake, without understanding what is here. All knowledge, all the wisdom of millennia will be lost. Antonov closed his eyes. He faced a choice that would determine not only his fate, but the fate of all humanity. Stay and gain knowledge of the future, losing his humanity in the process. Or leave, condemning the world to repeat all the mistakes of history. He opened his eyes and looked at Belov. The sergeant major looked at him with understanding. He knew that the commander would make the right decision. Whatever it was. I'll give you an answer in an hour, Antonov said. Okay. But remember, this decision cannot be changed. The hour allotted for reflection was ticking away at a frightening rate. In the underwater city, where the usual flow of time did not exist, Antonov felt every second like a hammer blow. He stood before the Guardian, an ancient, incomprehensible mind of light and metal, and held in his hands not only his own fate, but perhaps that of all mankind. Belov, loyal and straight as a bayonet, stood next to him, his hand not letting go of the handle of the diving knife. He was ready to carry out any order, even if it was the last one. The members of the lost expedition, no longer quite human but rather vessels for ancient knowledge, watched him silently. There was no emotion in their eyes, only calm expectation. They had already made their choice. "I can't stay," Antonov finally said, his voice, amplified by the hydrophone, booming and decisive. "I'm a soldier. I swore an oath to my country, to my people. To become an observer, even for the greater good, is to betray that oath." The Guardian's tentacles trembled slightly, and his voice sounded in the Major's mind again. "Then I must protect myself. Your superiors will not stop. They will send soldiers, they will drop bombs. They will destroy what they do not understand. I will be forced to respond with force, and that will lead to the catastrophe I am trying to prevent. And I cannot allow you to destroy this place," Antonov continued, looking at Belov, who gripped the knife even tighter. "To destroy the knowledge you hold is a crime against reason itself." He took a step forward, closer to the pulsating sphere. "I propose a third way. An agreement. A treaty? With a member of a species that breaks all treaties? With an officer who keeps his word," Antonov answered firmly. "You say that humanity is not ready for contact. That it needs more time. So give us that time. Fall asleep again. Lay low. For 50 years. During that time, a lot will change. Empires will fall, new technologies will emerge, people will become different. Perhaps in half a century they will be ready to listen to you. And what in return, Major? What do you offer me?" "I offer you silence. My silence. I will do everything to make this place forgotten. I will write a report that will force Moscow not to study this lake, but to destroy it, erase it from the maps, concrete it. I will become the keeper of your secret on the surface, while you sleep in the depths. I will give you these 50 years. There was a long pause. The sphere's pulsation slowed. Antonov felt the ancient mind weighing his proposal, scanning thousands of possible futures. "This is a risky plan, Major. You are taking on a huge responsibility. Knowledge of the future will be your curse. You will see the mistakes, but you will not be able to correct them, bound by your promise." "I understand the price," Antonov said. "But it's the only price I'm willing to pay." "Okay. I accept your offer. 50 Earth years. I will hide the city, go to sleep. But remember, Major, if your silence is broken, I will wake up earlier. And then the conversation will be different." The sphere flashed a bright blue light, blinding Antonov and Belov for a moment. When their sight returned, they saw the underwater city begin to change. The buildings became transparent, dissolving in the water. The 7 figures of the missing expedition bowed to them one last time and disappeared into the pulsating light. The lake fell asleep. "It's time," said Antonov. "Let's go back." The ascent to the surface was strange. The pressure in his head disappeared, the water became icy again. Looking back, Antonov saw only a dark, lifeless depth. As if there had been no city, no guardian. As if all this had been just a collective hallucination. When they got to the shore, they were met by the frightened faces of Zaitsev and Kulikov. Communication was lost for 2 hours. The radio operator reported, "We thought you were dead." And the lake, it stopped glowing. Antonov looked at the water. It was ordinary, dark, rippled by the wind. As if nothing had happened. "The expedition perished," he said in a flat, official voice. "An accident. They fell through the ice while taking samples in the center of the lake. The bodies were carried away by the underwater current." Zaitsev and Kulikov exchanged glances. They understood that it was a lie, but they saw in the commander's eyes an order to remain silent. "What shall we report to the center?" asked Zaitsev. "We will report the truth, but not the whole truth," Antonov answered. The abnormal activity of the lake was caused by emissions of methane and other gases from a tectonic fault on the bottom. This caused the water to glow and the fish to die. The expedition, without understanding the situation, came too close to the epicenter and perished as a result of a sudden collapse of the bottom rocks. The area is extremely dangerous. I recommend complete isolation and liquidation of the lake by targeted explosions to avoid an ecological catastrophe. It was the perfect report. It explained all the oddities without resorting to mysticism, and it guaranteed that no one would ever come here again. 2 days later, a helicopter arrived for them. The group returned to Irkutsk, where Antonov personally reported to Lieutenant Colonel Sadov. He listened silently, without asking unnecessary questions. He saw that the major had returned as a different person. The report was sent to Moscow. The decision was made immediately. A week later, an engineering battalion arrived in the area of Lake Beloy. Explosions thundered over the taiga for a month. The lake was drained, and in its place a giant funnel formed, which was soon filled with thousands of tons of concrete. Object Beloy Ussr fort ceased to exist. All members of Antonov's group were scattered across different parts of the country, having signed a non-disclosure agreement for 75 years. They never met again. Major Antonov's life changed forever. He was promoted for a brilliantly executed operation. He became a colonel, then a general. His analytical notes amazed his superiors with their accuracy. He predicted political crises, personnel changes, the outcome of international conflicts. He was called the seer from Lubyanka, a genius of analysis. But no one knew the price of this genius. Every day he lived with the knowledge of the future, which he could not change. He saw how Khrushchev would be removed in 1964. He knew about the introduction of troops into Czechoslovakia in 1968. He had a premonition of the war in Afghanistan. He wrote reports, hinted, tried to direct, but was powerless against the course of history, which was shown to him in the depths of a Yakut lake. He became the loneliest man on earth, a prisoner of a secret with no one to share it with. He watched as the country he loved and protected slowly moved toward its disintegration, and he could do nothing, bound by a word given to an inhuman mind. Decades passed. In 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. It was a shock for everyone. For retired KGB General Sergei Dmitrievich Antonov, it was just another day, the same as he had seen in 1954.